Hi, Misha here, and those who followed the channel for a number of years know that one of my favorite guns is the CZ Bren 2. Well, for that matter, the original 805 Bren, which kind of won me over. Originally, I wasn't a big fan of it. And today in America, we have the Bren 2 MS guns, both pistols and carbines. But for a very brief time in 2018, we had the original Bren 2S, and we had 5.56 guns and 7.62 by 39 guns. First we got the 8-inch barrel version, then the 11, and then at the end the 14. And having had all three in 5.56, I wasn't really interested in the 7.62 by 39s. I'll explain. I had to decide which one to keep, because even back then when these came out, they were basically two grand, which seemed like a lot of money in 2018 when the original 805 brand was on clearance for $1,000, give or take. I decided to go with my 11-inch here, and since so few Bren 2S's came in, that was a decision I've had to live with until now. On trade with a customer, I got another Bren 2S 14-inch in. So once more I have a decision. Would I rather have the semi-automatic version of the Czech military's Bren 2A2 carbine, the 11-inch, or their Bren 2A1 quote-unquote rifle, their 14-inch? Can't keep both because today prices are even higher, so one has to go. Now, that means we'll be doing switching of the slings if we do that. But I'm not going to have any suspense. I have decided to keep the 11-inch, and I wanted to explain why. I also kind of wanted to give some context for the Bren 2 versus the 805 a little bit. Last year I did a bigger video really digging into the 805 because it's quite a fascinating history. We're not going to do that today. But before I ship this gun out to its new owner, I thought we would look at the 14-incher, because you don't see, for that matter, you don't see many Bren 2 MS's with the 14-inch barrel, and you definitely don't see many Bren 2S's with the 14-inch 5.56 barrel. In fact, of the 6 variants, this could be technically, I don't want to say the rarest, but the one you do come across the least often. So, yeah, let's briefly just look at the differences in these two, and also discuss Bren 2S and Bren 2 MS, just for those who, may not be up to date. From the receiver, these are identical. It's just that I've turned mine into a carbine with the CZ stock, and this one has the original pistol end cap / arm brace adapter. I've seen it said that these shipped with the SP tactical brace. Some did, but you could buy the gun with or without the brace. It was a package offered by the vendor in America. So they didn't ship from like the Czech Republic with them. I mean, they had the adapter, the end bit, but the actual tube and brace, you had to add. So the receiver is the same on both. Both do come with the flip-up sights. So really the only difference is the barrel. The 11-inch on this is dead on at 11 inches, so about 270 millimeters. The 14-inch is actually just a hair longer than 14. I believe it's about 357 millimeters, which is like 14.0506 inches, not counting the flash hider device. This one came with the same flash hider device. It's a 3-prong system. It is designed to be a wire cutter. It's also designed to be suppressor compatible, because this has a 3-way gas system. You have standard, adverse, and then fully shut off. Of course, you can pull the plug out and swap it. And because of the different barrel length, we have slightly different weight. The 11-inch guns unloaded, no optic on them, they're about 6 pounds, 12 ounces. For that matter, the 8-inch gun, which is actually about an 8.1, is about 6 pounds, 3 ounces. Because of this longer barrel and the bayonet lug, and the barrel itself actually does seem slightly thicker, this is about 7 pounds, 3 ounces. So a little bit longer and a little bit heavier. Actually, it's quite amazing that between the 8 and the 14, we basically have a pound difference, with the 11 being right in the middle. Nevertheless, for a full gun, because the 14-inch Bren 2A1 is considered the rifle, and this is considered the carbine, yeah, it's quite lightweight. So what about the difference between the Bren 2S and Bren 2MS? Real quick. Essentially, it's the receiver. The handguard, or rather lack thereof, on the 2S is easy to spot. This is all one piece. It has M-lock slots, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, or 2 on each side, I should say, and 2 on the bottom. This one they both have different panels. Whereas the 2MS actually has a modular handguard that comes off here and must be able to replace it. So, single piece versus 2-piece receiver. But there are a few other differences. For one, the top rail on the 2S is a standard Picatinny top rail, 1913. The 2MS rail actually has kind of a swoop in the middle, kind of a hollowed out cutout, which serves effectively as a lightning cut, and that's because the 2MS actually lacks the lightning cut here. See how this is divoted in? The 2MS doesn't have that. And flipping it over, you can see another substantial one on this side too. So to kind of make up for not having those cutouts on the receiver, they relieve the top rail. So that's really the only differences of note. There might be some tiny internal ones, but that's about all I can think of. I will say on the accessory front, the 2S shipped with 2 of these mags, which I did confirm way back when these were coming out that these were the mags being issued within the Czech military, namely the Airborne and Special Forces. But when the 2MS came out, they started shipping with these CZ branded kind of Magpul PMag clones or copies. And also the cleaning / toolkit change. The ones that came with the 2S were more of a NATO belt pouch. And the ones that came with the 2MS were the ones in little zipper CZ case. And most of the toolkit is pretty standard, but one nice thing, they actually do give you the wrench to remove the barrel. There are essentially 6 screws that allow for a semi-quick change barrel. And that's because these are nominally caliber convertible. Both of these are in 5.56, but as I said earlier, you could purchase them in 7.62x39, or, especially on the military market, a conversion kit could be purchased. Obviously, you would swap your barrel and your gas system out. You would also change your bolt itself, or as they call it, the breech block. And the way they did the lower is quite clever. The magwell isn't changed out so much as there's actually a block, a filler block, a spacer block in here. So when you go to the larger 7.62x39 mags, you take this out. And the 7.62x39 Bren 2 does not feed from AK mags for 2 reasons. One, Czechoslovakia, and later the Czech Republic, never used an AK, AKM, or even AK-74. They never used AK mags. So while that was a standard mag elsewhere in Europe in the Comblock, Warsaw Pact, it wasn't for them. Secondly, making their own 7.60x39 mags meant that they could make them compatible more or less with an AR-15 type magwell, including having a last round hold open. If they tried to use AK mags, it wouldn't work. Now, they could have used VZ58 mags, or at least a pattern based on them, but then they would have probably lost the compatibility because the curves and angles would not have lined up. They would have had to have gone to a whole different alloy, polymer, fiberglass type lower. So, I get the call they made, and of course there also is the fringe advantage that, they get to sell extra mags. But the 5.56 versions, that take standard AR mags, M16, M4 mags. So that's one reason I like the 5.56. Another is within the Czech Republic, these are the two versions they use, the 14-inch and the 11-inch 5.56. To my knowledge, at least in any numbers of note, they do not use the 8.1-inch 5.56 gun. And the only major contract of note for the 760x39 gun was an export to the French Guienne, who purchased roughly 70 in 760x39 for their anti-terrorism special forces. And the reason they did that was it was felt that in a small package out of a short barrel, it was better armor penetrant than 5.56, and they're probably not wrong about that. The Bren 2 does surprisingly well with an 11-inch barrel, given that it's a 1-in-7 twist. But going below that, the 8-inch is fun, but it may be, pushing it a bit much. The 14-inch, well, according to CZ, it's good out to 500 meters. The 11-inch, 400 meters, and the 8-inch, 300 meters. That might be pushing it a bit, but hey, do what you want. These are threaded 1/2x28 as a standard, and these barrels are quite nice. They're cold hammer forged, chrome lined, and CZ says they're good for at least 20,000 rounds, even considering select fire or full auto fire. And they basically say the rest of the gun is good for 30,000 rounds or more before major parts need to be replaced. Not that the whole gun's completely scrap at 30,000 rounds, it's just like after 30,000 rounds, it kind of needs to go in for a rebuild or at least a tune-up, in theory. So, yeah. What else? The iron sights are nice. Sometimes they do have the night inserts, folding style. They're kind of a knockoff of a Troy. I think the early ones were actually Troy. And yeah, the one unique thing, and the one thing that's kind of most tempting about the 14-incher is our bayonet lug here. So if you've got a lug, well, of course you have to stick a bayonet on it. This is the Czech Bren bayonet, at least one of them. I think there's at least a newer one. I've had this one for a while. Kind of a half blade or quarter blade on that edge. Pretty sharp, honestly, with some serrations. It also comes with a little kit that replaces this, where it can be more of a fighting knife. Interestingly, on the Bren 2, it has a little bit of wiggle, but it still fits. I do think probably the lug was a bit of an afterthought, frankly. Here's the sheath. The lug itself, get it off here, is very close to NATO, but it's longer. The nubbin isn't short. It goes back a little more. So while a M9 or M7 will go on, it doesn't quite lock. And of course, this can be used as a wire cutter. It's a cool bayonet. And at least this one is a carryover from the original 805 Bren, specifically the 805A1. So with that, this is that part of the video where I have to go on about history a little bit. Bren 2A1, or at least the semi-automatic version, and the 805A1, or at least the S1 semi-automatic version. Mine here has the 14-inch barrel. Fun fact, this barrel on the original is slightly longer than this one. They're both classed as 14, but this is, like I said, about a 14.0506. This one's more like a 14.1, so it's like 2 millimeters longer. And interestingly, the 805A2, the carbine version, the 11-inch version, remember the 11-inch Bren 2 is right at 11. Well, with the 805, it's actually 10.9. Again, it's 2, maybe 3 millimeters shorter. So the A1 is longer and the A2 is shorter. Yeah, one thing that's not is, of course, the weight. That's one of the big things we talk about. the 14-inch versus 14-inch, there's a pound, even actually a little more than a pound difference. So like I said, this is roughly 7 pounds and some ounces, 3, 4, hard to say, whether stock or not stock. This one is over 8 pounds. I've seen about 8.2 ounces, but some might say 8.4. It just depends. The 11-inch version drops that to just under 8 pounds at about 7 pounds, 0.9. So, maybe 14 ounces. So that's one big thing, is the weight loss. Of course, we're not going to talk about all the differences here, but I did want to give some context to the military service. And also wanted to point out something on the barrel length. On this one, I actually made a little spacer here so I could get out to 16 inches, because with this barrel length and this flash hider, we were just under, like tantalizingly under, like 15.7, 15.8. It was excruciatingly close. Now this is actually threaded 14 by 1, so a different thread pitch too. Whereas this is half by 28. And this one, since it is ever so slightly shorter, with this device on, it's actually about 15.5, maybe 15.6 inches. So I've seen some people think, well, if I just permanently attach this muzzle device, I can just be legal at 16. Unfortunately, no. You're going to have to do something. And while I don't like this on here, I don't really feel like SBRing it just for that. Because this does have the longer gas system, you should have less exposed barrel. This, to me, has a lot of barrel hanging out there, and if we had to bump it up another ½ inch, it's just that much closer to absurdity. Honestly, I think if this was at 16 inches with the muzzle device on, and all I had to do was pin it on, I might be tempted by it. But because that won't work out of the box, and because it is noticeably heavier into the 7 pound range than the 8 or 11, and because I already have the 805A1 in the first generation with the 14, I thought it would be kind of cool to have an 11 and a 14, Gen 1, Gen 2. In a perfect world, I'd love to have, 4 guns, 2 of each, but it's not a perfect world, and these are far too expensive to do that with. So, yeah. So why the Bren 2? Why the 805? Why was it dropped after it took so long to be developed? Well, in the end, it's actually pretty logical. And here the 805 is with the bayonet on. For whatever reason, it actually fits tighter. It's not the device. It actually goes on to this nut here. Because of the way the system is, you actually tighten this nut up to lock everything on. But it fits very well on this one. It's not loose on the A2, the Bren 2, but looser. So why? They had the VZ58, and it was their standard service rifle until 2011. That's a good run. Now, if we're being fair, they considered replacing it back in the late 70s. In 1977, they started the LADA program, which was to develop a whole family of guns, a submachine gun size, a rifle size, even an LMG size. And they wanted to even make it multi-caliber. In 1984, it was approved to go in 5.45, and by 1987, they had working prototypes. And in 1990, they ordered up to 300,000 from CZ, or at least the Brno factory that was communist controlled. But before they could actually put those into production, communism was ending. So kind of the opposite of what happened in Poland with the Tantal. In 1991, Seller and Bellat started making M193, so 55 grain 5.56 ammo in Czechoslovakia. And then in 1993, Czechoslovakia was no more, breaking into the Czech Republic and Slovakia. So the days of the LADA were over. It's actually kind of where this mag comes from. Notice that it is not a standard AR mag in the 805. CZ had put a lot of time and energy into the LADA, so they tried reinventing it, floating it around. In fact, when it was clear that the Czech Republic was going to join NATO, They reinvented it as a few different names, frankly, including the CZ805. Not this one, different one. Rechambering it from 545 to 556. It should be noted that even though they considered going to 545 in Czechoslovakia, they never issued it. They jumped straight from 762 by 39 to 556, but it would be a long voyage. The Lada failed, and in the early 21st century, especially for special forces, they actually started purchasing AR-15s, namely Bushmasters. They even floated the idea of obtaining a production license for the M4 from Colt, but this never came to fruition. They essentially made do with the VZ-58 and then bought ARs as needed. But in 2006, CZ started really getting serious about this gun. It was originally designed by a gentleman named Finderak, but he would quickly pass away. He had actually been trying to propose this modular kind of Lego blocky system to CZ since the late 90s. They hired him as a contractor, and within a year he had a prototype. And these were originally known as the CZS-805. They really like that 805 name. And there were big plans. They were going to make it multi-caliber, lightweight, and different barrel lengths. And they really tried to get the Czech military interested, but they just weren't. So they would show it in trade shows and just kind of bumped it around Europe for a couple of years, until finally in 2009, when the Czech military realized they had to do something, and they finally issued specifications for what they wanted their new rifle to be. So over 24 companies submitted designs in November of that year, and it quickly boiled down to the S805, now being kind of known as the Bren, is a project name to kind of harken back to CZ's early success with the Bren LMG, and the FN Scar Light. Many like to play this off as just a Scar copy, but really, it's concurrent development. Again, Mr. Fonderak, he had this concept in his head for years, even going back to the 90s. It was just that was technology at the day and time. Now, did they borrow some elements from the Scar? I'm sure they did. But either way, in March of 2010, they declared this the winner. No reason to go into why. Maybe it was a better gun, maybe it was equal, and since it was domestically designed and made, hey, let's support the home industry. Can't blame them for that. I definitely don't feel like this is inferior to the Scar Light, frankly. And after getting some pre-production models, the military gave a few changes they wanted, which delayed full production until summer of 2011. And originally the Czech military had ordered roughly 8,000, about 6,700 A1s, 14-inch, and roughly 1,300 A2s, 11-inch. So this contract would be fulfilled in 2013, and subsequent contracts would be placed with CZ. So you would think everyone's happy, right? The Army, they have a new gun after over half a century. CZ, they've been pushing this gun, and it's finally making its way. They have thousands ordered. Well, no. And that's why we have the Bren 2. Mechanically, these are very similar. Rotating bolt, short stroke, gas piston system, adjustable gas regulator, folding and adjustable shoulder stock, all that. But, well, this wasn't the gun CZ really wanted to make. They rushed it in to make those trials. Actually, originally, it wasn't even supposed to have this alloy receiver. I believe it's a T6 aircraft. This was actually just a stopgap, a temporary block. This was actually supposed to be primarily a polymer receiver to save on weight. That's why it's so big and chunky and has this long gas system. They thought it would be polymer, so it needs to have more. But it worked, and it stuck, and it did add weight, 8 pounds plus. Okay. The caliber. Originally they wanted multi-caliber. 5.56, of course, 7.62 by 39. Even a larger version, kind of like a Scar Heavy, a 7.62 NATO, which could be maybe later redone for others. First that was dropped. Then the 7.62x39 version was dropped. Even the barrel lengths were dropped from 3, sub kind of sized one, down to just the 11 and the 14. So instead of having a whole family, we only have 2 guns, both in the same caliber. And we're still using this magazine. This rock and lock style is actually evolved from the Lada program, although it is very similar to an HK G36. Another thing very similar to the Lada was the trigger group system. It's kind of a carryover, including having a 4-way selector, safe, single shot, 2-shot, and automatic. Okay. One feature the military requested and that they added that's kind of unique for a rifle are these interchangeable back straps for the pistol grip. So that's pretty cool. It is a good gun. It's very reliable. One thing I've always thought was nice about the 805, the trigger. And again, good iron sights copied. The optics used on these were either the Mioptas from the Czech Republic or aim points. It's kind of depending. It's not what I put on mine, of course, because I can see them. Now, they did make a modular magwell. Well, the standard Czech Army would use the Lada-style rock and lock mags. The Special Forces, who had been using AR-15s, would have a block that took AR-15 mags, and originally there would be a pin running through to reinforce. That was another change asked by the military. And then, while I have mine set up to be pretty close to a military gun here, I don't have the side rails, I just don't need them, and I left it in its natural import 805 S1 color versus kind of going to that gray color. Maybe one day I'll do it. And I just brought my Bren 2 11-inch back out to kind of talk about what CZ decided to do. By 2016, the Czech Armed Forces had over 17,000 805s. Most A1s, but several thousand A2s. But its day was already over. Going back to 2013, 2014, CZ was already working on what would become the Bren 2, although back then it was often called the CZ 806 Bren. These would be developed to be more internationally marketable, because this was designed specifically for what the Czech military said they wanted. For example, it has a last round hold open, but no real release. But it has a manual button. That's very Czech military. It has a reciprocating cocking handle, and it had a bolt that couldn't easily be disassembled in the field. These are things that the Czech army thought they wanted. Unfortunately, soldiers soon disagreed. They also, well, they liked the gun, thinking it was in many ways a good improvement over the VZ58, pointed out, rightfully, that it was heavy, and it was kind of imbalanced. There is a lot of weight out front. Even though this is a lightweight barrel, it's a pretty long gas system. It's heavy. And they also pointed out the ergonomics, again, not having the bolt release, the reciprocating handle, a few other things, a 4-way selector, the stock. They weren't the greatest. They could be better. On the other hand, it was nice to be able to deploy a gun that could actually operate with fellow NATO forces and use the same mags and same bullets and all that. So it had that over the VZ58. So instead of this being the end result, well, CZ used it as a jumping off board to develop this. And that was really good because in October of 2015, the Czech government, Czech Armed Forces, essentially released an urgent request, urgent demand for a new gun. At least an updated version, because they felt that the global situation was changing. You know, there was the war in Syria, there was an immigration issue within Europe, the war in Afghanistan was dragging on, and they wanted to make some improvements. And in January of 2016, they ordered 2,000 of the new 806 Bren 2s, mix of 11 and 14-inch guns. So it was actually really good they had those. Now, these would still be in inventory, of course, but the new guns would soon go to some special forces who were also using Daniel Defense ARs at the time, still are today, and the airborne and others for trials and field testings and all that. And it did really, really well, which meant the 805 production line here was pretty much over. That was the zenith of their service in the Czech military, be 2016, because they would start receiving the updated version. And again, they really are pretty well the same gun, but just evolved. So this went from being an end goal to what they considered an intermediate, a transitional, a interim, a stepping stone gun. Hey, we went from the VZ58 to this. We ordered several thousand, gave CZ work, experience. It allowed CZ to hire more workers, improve their techniques, and it wasn't unappreciated. But, you know, if we're going to need more, we can do better, right? Since it's only here for a limited time, let's bring out the 14-inch Bren 2 again. Because it doesn't have a stock on it, this is actually noticeably lighter. Obviously, this one's kitted up too. So, the barrels didn't change a whole lot, although the thread pitch did. The gas system would go from a 2 position to a 3, and they would really shorten it down a lot. This would save weight, and of course we would go from a very traditional reciprocating charging handle, which frankly I don't mind. I really don't. Sorry, there it is. It's a very smooth bolt, to a very nicely done non-reciprocating with a polymer thing. This is one of the best charging handles I've come across, frankly. So that helped a lot. They of course had a last round hole open with a manual release lever. For the military guns, they did away with the 2-round burst, simplifying the selector and the trigger group, so safe single shot auto. They made the controls even more ambidextrous. They made AR-15 mags the standard, getting rid of the old kind of Lada-inspired mags, the G36 types. And they made the lower lighter. They actually gave it some lightning cuts, as you see, this kind of waffle pattern, but they made it a single piece instead of 2 pieces that are divided here. This actually does save on weight and makes it sturdier at the same time. The sights changed just a little bit, the iron sights, but pretty well the same. Like I said, we have a lightning cut receiver. We never did go to a polymer upper. I think they decided, you know what, if we just chop off the front couple of inches, shorten the gas piston, we can save weight there. So let's do that. Speaking of the gas piston, you'll notice the regulator is much bigger than here. It's easier to get to. Also, the bolt now, of course, can be disassembled in the field like an AR-15 style, or maybe AR-18 would be more accurate. And overall, disassembly is just a little bit easier. So, you know, aces all around. And finally, as you've already seen, the buttstocks are changed just to be a little more ergonomic. This is actually a 2-piece affair. There's an internal block, and then this goes on this, whereas the Bren 2 is just a single piece affair. So simpler, easier, lighter, and a much more comfortable cheek comb, even though this one isn't bad. This one does have a removable cheek piece too. I didn't put it on. And they simplified the pistol grip, also giving it more of a texture than a ribbed. This is a very 80s, 90s look to it. This is very modern, mag pulley. And so yeah, that's why it's so much lighter. And finally, CZ did what they always wanted to do. 3 barrel lengths instead of just 2. And they did the 760x39, and then they eventually did the Bren 2 BR, which evolved into the Bren 2 PPS, which was a larger caliber version, 7.62 NATO. So this is a true multi-caliber, 3 calibers and counting, multi-barrel, 3 barrels and counting. I should point out that the 760x39 short barrel is actually a little bit longer. It's roughly 9 inches, a little bit less compared to the slightly over 8 inches for the 5.56. I don't know why. It just is. The other 2 barrels, 11 and 14, are the same for calibers. And that's one reason this receiver is so much shorter here. And this kind of looks a little strange with all this hanging out, because you need this much to let an 8-inch barrel plug in, because it doesn't stick out very far. And it also saves weight. But this is what CZ kind of always envisioned making, with the exception of maybe the alloy versus polymer receiver. And here are the 2 stocks folded up. Interesting how the butt extends here, and this has more extending out. Both have 4 positions, But this one just kind of stays friction closed, and then of course latches open. There's no real lock to it. This one though actually can lock to the brass deflector. It's got a little notch on the bottom for it. And this is one of a couple of different stocks. Some will probably already say, well, this is actually the different one, blah, blah, blah. Fine, it's a CZ stock, it works. But I just wanted to show it does actually latch to the side. Just, again, another little improvement. Even though this only ejects to the right, the brass deflector means that it's left-hand friendly, and all the other controls are mirrored on both sides. So yeah, improvements to the pistol grip, the stock, the magwell, calibers. The barrels actually interchange very similar on both guns. It's just there aren't many barrels to swap with on the original 805. So, yeah. After those initial 2,000 or so were shipped, by 2019, the Czech Armed Forces decided they were going with the Bren 2, and they made a new roadmap plan for a multi-year purchase program. Between that time and about 2024, they were going to get 14,000 more Bren 2 A1s and Bren 2 A2s. And then they decided that by 2025, they were going to retire the 805 Bren. At this time, the 805 is still in some service as more A2s are delivered. But the good thing is they have enough between the two that they've been able to fully retire a couple of years ago the VZ58. So once they have enough Bren 2s, the plan is to retire the 805, putting it in reserve where the VZ58 is currently, and that means they can scrap, surplus out their VZ58s, finally getting rid of them after 75 plus years. And they also picked up a new underbarrel 40mm grenade launcher, the CZ G1. It's actually a pretty cool little launcher that fits under here. And I should say that, yeah, the military version would have side rails, which I could add, but I like mine. I like these things. Don't I really put on it, frankly. So that's the plan. Again, I don't think the 805 was a failure. Really don't. But it was a great interim stepping stone, and now they've got a very good modern battle rifle, assault rifle, whatever you want to call it here. So what about the semi-autos? And again, me keeping this one and letting the 14 go. The 805 appeared in America as a semi-automatic pistol in 2015. It was the 805 PS1. It had the 11-inch barrel, and yeah. It was a good gun, of course, 5.56. And then the next year, it was joined by the 805 S1 carbine, which actually had a 16-inch barrel, not the 14, and it was threaded half by 28, not the 14mm. So, and I've also noticed the S1 has a slightly heavier barrel than the A1 style. But at least they did have the stock. So, yeah, hey. And those were the only two that came in. But, of course, by 2016, over in Czech Republic, the Bren, the original one, was on its way out. And, in fact, that would lead to them being discontinued in 2018. CZ made a big announcement saying they're no longer doing the 805. And so this is when they were on sale, both the pistol and the rifle. And yes, they also did the FDE version. And this is when prices dropped to $1,000, even $900 brand new. And of course, some took advantage, and some waited way too long. Either way, these are gone now. I think a lot of people thought the Bren 2 would just be superior, and so who needs to keep their 805? I understand that, and I would say, all in all, I do think this is a better gun. However, I will say that the 805 has a better stock trigger, and it does have a very smooth bolt. And while it may not be great in military circles, the extra weight means that when you're shooting it, it's very stable, and the longer receiver gives you more rail space up top. It also gives you a longer sight radius. So, potentially, those can be benefits. And it's funny to see that people are starting to recognize them when it's far too late. In fact, we don't even have Bren 2S's. And thus we're back to late summer, early fall of 2018, more or less where we started when these came in. No one knows for sure how many Bren 2S's made it. it's at least 50, 50, 50, 50, 50, 50 for a total of 300. 150, 5.56, 150, 760 by 39s. However, 760 by 39s guns would have continued to appear on the market on and off for a couple of years. Some say these were more import batches, which wouldn't surprise me considering they had to make a run for the French anyway. Others say they were actually just unsold stock being recycled. I don't know. I definitely do think the 14-inch 5.56 is the one I see the least of. Fun fact, the 14-inch 7.62 by 39, usually, if ever, it did not have the bayonet lug. So that I'd share that. So that kind of makes it unique. So I'd say of all of them, even if technically they're the same numbers imported, it's the one you're least likely to find, which is why I was really tempted to keep it. But in the end, I keep coming back to the reason I kept the 11 in the first place. I just like it. I like the balanced look. I mean, barring the extension. But the barrel sticks out where it seems appropriate. It's still a very lightweight gun at about 6.5 to 6.75 pounds. Bayonet lug is really cool, but I've got the 805 that has the lug. And everything else is the same. Now, if I find a 14-inch barrel assembly with bayonet lug in life later, I will definitely get it because swapping them out is super easy. Screws. So that will probably be my ultimate solution. But no, I considered it. I really, really did. But this is mine. I picked it up when these came out in 2018. And I will say this. These were not given to anyone, any YouTuber, as a T&E, like Military Arms Channel. Everyone that has a Bren 2S bought it. And there never really was dealer pricing. CZ essentially offloaded these all to one distributor because CZ USA did not want the Bren 2S. It was a mistake. Was it ATF approved? 100%. Yeah, these are perfectly legal. But they wanted the Bren 2 MS. So that's why in 2019 we started seeing that, and including the Bren 2 MS carbine. Will more ever come in? Technically, they can. There's nothing preventing, like legally, the Bren 2S. But again, CZ USA, which is now in Arkansas, just doesn't seem interested in this version. Was it a mistake to go to the 2MS over the 2S? I can understand the argument for the 2MS because of the modular rail system, but most everyone I've talked to agrees this is the gun most folks would want. Another idea would be continue to import the 2MS as a standard gun, and then just bring in like 300 2S's each year just to satisfy the collector market. You could do that. I don't know. Companies make interesting decisions, and sometimes we don't know all the facts. I will say that in 2017, Egypt purchased some Brens for their airborne, and then the next year they purchased more for their Royal Guard. And then in 2019, talks began with Hungary for the Bren 2 to replace their aging fleet of AKs. And then most recently, last year, the Bren 2 PPS replaced the old SVD Dragunov in the Czech Republic as the DMR, the designated marksman rifle, or sniper rifle if you prefer. So, these are doing well. They've seen combat in Afghanistan and elsewhere. And CZ's still making them. The military will have at least 16,000, with the last ones being delivered next year. And the year after that, the 805 itself will probably get retired out. Not a bad run, really, considering how much of a homegrown design it was. So with that said, which version do you like more? The 8, the 11, the 14, the 5.56, or even the 760 by 39? Because options are good. For example, the 8 or the 9-inch have the very small, very lightweight thing going on. That's awesome. The 11-inch, I've already told you why I like it, but the 14-inch, well, you do get more practical barrel, although the sight radius is the same. And of course, with the 5.56, you get the bayonet lug. So, you know, each to one. The 5.56, the reason I kept it, this is what the Czechs use. And also, while you've heard of a few issues with the Bren 2, really when you look into them, they mostly seem to boil down to the 760 by 39 guns. Nothing crazy like them exploding. No. Just some gas port erosions, things like that. So, seems like the 5.56s are just a more stable platform. Plus, I don't have to buy different mags. I can use AR mags that I already have, aside from the CZ mags they come with. And I don't really have any for more 7.62x39 guns. I have a couple of AKs. Probably the same reason I don't own a Swiss Sig SG553R. Cool gun, really neat, but just don't really need it. But, a modern import that's essentially as close to a military as you can get, yeah, the Bren 2S I was a sucker for. And I can't imagine how or why I would ever sell mine. I mean, maybe I would trade it for a different version, but, it's apples for apples trade. And I don't foresee selling the 805, because while the Bren 2 has a lot going on, the 805 is an important step too. And if I didn't have it in the collection, it would just jump from VZ58 to Bren 2, and that would just look kind of weird. No, it's a necessary piece, and the truth is, I really like shooting it. I really do. This wasn't a shooting video. I just wanted to do something while we had the 14-inch to talk about. We haven't done an update on the Bren 2 in a long while, so hope you enjoyed it. And it'll be interesting to see this rifle's future, and to see if we get a version of the Bren 2 PPS over here. That'd be kind of cool. Lately, I have been picking up more 308s after not getting many for a long time. So, maybe. Czech guns are just neat. They really are. Very good craftsmanship. And it's cool that these are factory guns. So what do you think? Yeah, which one would you pick? Or even would you go 2S or 2MS? Well, let's discuss below. And if you own one, tell me the good. Or if you own one, tell me the bad. If you've had trouble with your Bren 2, I want to hear about it. Really, I do. So, let's discuss. With that, I better get this one boxed up and on the way to its new owner. In a perfect world, I'd keep both. But honestly, I feel very grateful just to have what I have, guys. I'm very blessed in that, and I know it. Really like guns. But keep in mind, too, this is a collection I've spent the better part of 30 years or 25 years plus building. So, yeah. Alrighty, guys. As always, if you could, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support the channel, you know the drill. Follow the link to Patreon. In fact, we have a Q&A coming up very soon, so submit a question. This is Misha, and on behalf of Fox and others, we'll catch you very soon next time.